life's blood into. I am so honored that I got hired at Fox 23 years ago. It has been a gift in my life. That just isn't true. And Hannity has maintained his leverage and his singular importance to the network's conservative audience by bringing in huge ratings. Here, we're number one thanks to all of you that listen to this program. And I just got to tell you, my relationship has never been better with the management of Fox. And it's never been. What they're saying here is not true. Rupert Murdoch has been wonderful to me. I don't know James Murdoch that well, but I know Lachlan, and he's been wonderful to me. So I'm kind of like, why don't you guys talk to me first? Maybe not people that must have some agenda. And I just have a great working relationship with everybody there. Except I guess a few people may not like me, but that's their problem. You know, I assume some people disagree with my opinions. Anyway, on to more important matters. I want to read, because this all comes down to one thing: judicial philosophy. What do we want as conservatives? What do we believe the role of the judiciary is as conservatives versus what does the left want? I loved what Newt said on his program yesterday. If you just 30 seconds before the president comes out, just imagine that it was going to be Hillary Clinton coming out to announce her second nominee to the United States Supreme Court. Because she would be looking for a judicial activist, someone that wants to legislate from the bench, someone that doesn't respect co-equal branches, doesn't respect separation of powers. We even have some members of the Supreme Court that have gone as far as to actually cite foreign law to justify their radical judicial activist opinions. The people that I have most admired in my lifetime on the Supreme Court, if you've never taken the time to listen to arguments in the Supreme Court, you get audio in cases we obviously don't have cameras in the courtroom there. It is the most fascinating intellectual exercise you will ever hear. And for example, somebody might be arguing a point, they don't get 3 words out, and they're being interrupted by a justice. And they have to be quick and on their feet because all the justices have already read their arguments, and they basically then have questions about it. And it doesn't go on for a very long or extended period of time, but it is a powerful back and forth that sometimes takes place. And Antonin Scalia was well known for his wit, his humor, his intellectualism, and I love what he once said, that, you know, there are times as a judge that you must do what the law demands, not what you personally like. So, as a conservative, we believe in separation of powers, co-equal branches. We believe in the Constitution, that this is a constitutional republic. We don't think judges ought to be writing law from the bench to advance a liberal agenda, because that's what elections are about, and that's what the legislative branch of government is about.
He just
and
pulled
that's
out there and
their
didn't even
job.
look.
So what Judge Kavanaugh said in 2006 at this administrative law conference hosted by George Mason Law School, Judge Brett Kavanaugh described how, like Justice Scalia, he devoted textualism and what is known as originalism and rejects unbridled judicial activism. Let me quote him to you, because this gives me the most hope about the president's election. Because this is my judicial philosophy. This is what I believe in, what he said. And he's actually said much of this last night. He said, quote, "What did Justice Scalia stand for as a judge?" He wrote, "It's not complicated, but it is profound and worth repeating often. The judge's job is to interpret the law, not to make the law or make policy." He writes, so read the words, or he spoke, read the words of the statute as written, in other words, the law, written by the legislative branch. Then he writes, then he said, read the text of the Constitution as written, mindful of history and tradition. And last night he talked and added the word precedence. He said, don't make up new constitutional rights that are not in the text of the Constitution. Don't shy away from enforcing constitutional rights that are in the text of the Constitution. And he wrote, changing the Constitution is for the amendment process. We have a constitutional process to change the Constitution. It's difficult. The bar is high, but it was designed to be high. And he writes, changing the Constitution, changing policy within constitutional bounds, that's for the legislative branch. Remember that the structure of the Constitution, the separation of powers and federalism, co-equal branches in other words, he says, are not mere matters of etiquette or architecture, but are at least as essential to protecting individual liberty as the individual rights that are guaranteed in that text. He goes on, and remember that courts have a critical role when a party has standing in enforcing those separation of powers and federalism limits. And he says, simple but profound. Now, he also talked about in a speech before Catholic University Law Review and wrote for them, he laid out his vision of the constitutional separation of powers and the role of a judge as an umpire in our system. And he said, at its core, in our separation of powers system, to be an umpire as a judge means to follow the law and not to make or remake the law, and to be impartial in how we go about doing that. He goes on, a good umpire should not be making up the strike zone as he or she goes along. Judges likewise should not make up the rules as they go along. We see this in statutory interpretation. For example, a good judge sticks to the established text and canons of construction that help guide us in interpreting ambiguous text. Justice Antonin Scalia had a profound influence on statutory interpretation, and one of the things he has helped us to do is to narrow the areas of disagreement about how to interpret the statutes. In other words, what the legislative branch passes as law. Every judge now seems to start with the text of the statute. And then he has commented on religious liberty issues and consistently has a background of having defended religious freedom and the Second Amendment. He, argued in interpreting the Second Amendment, Heller versus the District of Columbia, he dissented from the court's majority by writing, the district's ban on the possession of semi-automatic firearms is unconstitutional. And his dissent was quoted approvingly by Justice Thomas in asking whether the challenge law complies with text, history, tradition of the Second Amendment. Also on issues of free speech, et cetera, et cetera. The big issue that I seem to have, he's also shown an area of growth in 1998 when he worked with Ken Starr's office, his views on, as it relates to Clinton and obstruction and the role of independent counsels at the time. Now we got a special counsel that's basically evolved into the same mess as the independent counsel law. And then in 2009 reversed himself and said, no, this is not what I support. So let me just go to the left for a second here. We're going to spend time. We've got Newt Gingrich coming up. We've got Alan Dershowitz coming up. We've got my friend Greg Jarrett is stopping by, Sarah Carter, Ollie North today. We've got a lot of opinions. Let me play some of the insanity of Democrats in the Senate. And, people like Schumer and Warren and Booker and Gillibrand and Durbin and Feinstein and Blumenthal and the rest of them. Listen.
President Trump, with the nomination of Judge Kavanaugh, has fulfilled or is fulfilling two of his campaign promises. First, to undo women's reproductive freedom. Second, to undo ACA. And so I will oppose him with everything I've got.
I want to know something about this judge's values. And what he's revealed so far is not something that reflects America's values.
I will be saying with even stronger voice that we as the United States Senate, forget partisanship or what have you, of a respect for the Constitution to avoid a constitutional crisis, we cannot let this confirmation process go forward, especially now that we have someone that has clearly said that they have a strong opinion champion should any of those issues come before the Supreme Court.